Welcome to today's professional learning bite presented by CAPITALISE Education. In today's video, we're going to go deeper into the Universal Design for Learning Guidelines. The first principle of universal design for learning is the idea that I can engage students in the learning process in multiple ways. It consists of 3 guidelines and 8 checkpoints. The aim of the first principle of universal design for learning is to develop expert learners who are purposeful and motivated. The second principle of universal design for learning is the idea that teachers can represent knowledge to students in multiple ways. It consists of 3 guidelines and 12 checkpoints. The aim of the second principle of universal design for learning is to develop expert learners who are resourceful and knowledgeable. The final principle of universal design for learning is the idea that students can demonstrate their knowledge and understanding in multiple ways. It is underpinned by 3 guidelines and 9 checkpoints. The aim of the third principle of universal design for learning is to develop expert learners who are strategic and goal-directed. The 3 principles, 9 guidelines, and 31 checkpoints of the Universal Design for Learning framework are divided into 3 layers. The first layer is access. Those guidelines and checkpoints designed to help students overcome their barriers to the learning process and access the curriculum. The second layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework is referred to as build. Once students have accessed the learning process, these guidelines and checkpoints help students build on their skills and strategies to access the learning process. The third layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework is referred to as internalize. These guidelines and checkpoints help students internalize the skills and strategies to help them overcome their barriers to the learning process so they continue to become lifelong learners. The first guideline in the access layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on recruiting student interest. To achieve this, it encourages teachers during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle to focus on the relevance of the learning for the students, connect to the students' individual choices and interests, and to think about what threats and distractions might exist in the classroom and to remove these as much as possible. The second guideline in the access layer focuses on how students perceive information. During the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle, this guideline and the associated checkpoints encourage teachers to think about the multiple ways they can represent information to support students to perceive the information that teachers are presenting. The third guideline in the access layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on how students physically engage in the learning process. The focus of this guideline and the associated checkpoints is the multiple ways that students can engage and demonstrate what they can do, talking about using tools and assistive technology, as well as looking at varying the methods for response, both in terms of what they've learned and how they navigate information. The first guideline of the build layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on how students sustain their effort and persist in their learning. To achieve this, during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle, teachers think about how they support students to develop goals, how they vary the demands and resources they use within the classroom so they can challenge students, how they use collaborative processes during classroom interaction, and how the feedback they provide students focuses on mastery. The second guideline underpinning the build layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on the vehicle of representing information to student, which is language. It focuses on how teachers during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle need to clarify all the language and symbols they use within the classroom. It also focuses on the process of supporting students around decoding. For students in multiple curriculum areas with the same teacher, it talks about the teacher highlighting how words or terminology used in multiple curriculum areas are the same or different. For students from an EALD background, it focuses on making connections between students' first language and English. Another focus is the idea that teachers during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle use multiple media to represent information. The third guideline underpinning the build layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on how students express and communicate their ideas. The focus is on the use of multiple media and tools to represent and demonstrate their knowledge and understanding. It also focuses on, during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle, embedding Vygotsky's learning process, where students learn by the teacher contextualizing information, then modeling for students working collaboratively, and then students working individually. Through using this approach to the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle, it allows students to express and communicate their ideas in many different ways. The focus of the first guideline in the internalized layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on students developing self-regulation. To achieve this, classroom teachers during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle support students to internalize self-assessment and reflection tools, as well as personal coping skills and strategies. This is overall achieved by promoting expectations and beliefs that optimize student motivation. The second guideline underpinning the internalized layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework focuses on supporting students to develop internal strategies to support comprehension. To achieve this, teachers ensure that they supply students with the background knowledge they need to engage in the learning process, or support them to make connections between previous knowledge and new knowledge. And one way that teachers support students to develop internal strategies for comprehension is to support students to highlight patterns and critical features, big ideas and relationships in information. By doing this, they support students to guide information processing and visualization when they engage with new knowledge. Another focus of this guideline and the associated checkpoints is the idea that students are supported to transfer their information from one context to another and generalize their learning to other areas. The third guideline associated with the internalized layer of the Universal Design for Learning framework is the idea that teachers during the planning, teaching, and assessment cycle support students to develop internal strategies around executive functioning. To achieve this, a classroom teacher could support a student to develop some long-term goals associated with the learning goal and map out short-term goals to achieve the long-term goal. By doing this, classroom teachers support students to plan and engage in strategy development. When engaging with information and representing information, teachers support their students to manage that information and the resources they use. Students will not always have access to feedback from other people. As such, during this guideline, classroom teachers think about how they can support their students to internalize